Teachers and childcare workers, what is the worst case of helicopter parenting that my child can do no wrong you've ever seen? I had a boy who kept acting out in class, things like talking to classmates while I was giving directions, giving strange answers, hitting the boys next to him in the arm during class. I kept notes and informed our academy director about what was happening, and he was pulled aside after school a few times to talk about his behavior. One day at the end of class, he reached across the table and forcefully flicked the girl in the forehead. She complained and he pulled back his arm like he was going to punch her in response. I had him sit while I let everyone else leave and told him to stay seated while I discussed his behavior with the academy director. If nothing else, being the last one to go would be sort of punishment. The director chewed him out, and apparently he told his mom about it because his mom came to the academy to say that her son was an angel and I should be reprimanded for exaggerating or lying about the situation. Cue the director listing off all the stuff her son had done over the past few weeks and telling her that her son was no longer welcome at the academy. Never saw him again after that. I guess the kid learned that behavior somewhere because, it sounds like he needed help rather than being thrown out of school. But hey, I'm not a teacher, so what do I know? Story 2. In kindergarten, we have testing twice a year, one in winter and again in the spring. A parent called in a conference because her daughter had received 2% under the cutoff that suggested her child may, by 3rd grade, need additional help meeting reading goals. Now, that isn't why I consider her a helicopter parent. Those test scores can be confusing, and I could see why she might have been worried upon seeing that if she didn't really understand the way it worked. However, myself and my mentor teacher spent about 45 minutes with her kid in the room hearing everything, trying to console her that her daughter was doing fine and that we weren't concerned about her progress at all. We told her she interacts well with her peers, feels confident and comfortable reading, and that these tests aren't a good way to showcase understanding, especially for a 5-year-old. The mother revealed that she makes her daughter do over 30 minutes of homework every night and won't even let her walk downstairs without reciting all of her weekly spelling words. Other stuff too, but basically the mom was putting unreasonable pressure on this 5-year-old girl, like planning college and thinking years ahead. Dude, just relax. Your kid is 5. If we have any concerns, trust me, you would know. Don't burn your kid out this early in their education. Story 3. I had a 3rd grade student whose mother felt that I favored other students over her son. She would call me and yell at me about not treating him fairly and lying. She snuck past the office a few times to come into the classroom to watch me teach, which of course is illegal, and I'd have to call the office. She'd tell me and the principal that she was trying to catch me in the act of being dishonest. Of course, my principal always defended me and dealt with the parent. As a final straw, the mother bought a watch with a voice recorder in it and the boy wore it to school. He yelled out in the middle of class suddenly, "I'm secretly recording you and you won't teach me here for much longer." An 8-year-old. Of course, the watch was confiscated and the child was moved into a different classroom, though the school district could have legally moved him into another. But the mother still never backed down and the next teacher had similar issues. Story 4. Before uni started, we used to hold activities for first-year students, Frosh Week for Canadians reading this. Nothing educational, but always good fun. I had a student show up with his mother and she questioned everything we were doing and how it will relate to her son's studies. It didn't. We were very clear that it was all for building relationships and a bit of pre-study enjoyment. It was also a chance to meet older students and get an idea of uni life. She was having none of it. She wanted to speak with the head of the department and file an official complaint about these activities. Clearly, having fun was not part of an education. The second day, she came again and triumphantly said the dean is coming to talk to us. The dean did come, gave us a pep talk and said how much he enjoyed this time of the year, chugged a beer and told us to join him in the local pub later on. She was speechless and left in a huff, dragging her son by the hand. Neither showed up for the rest of the week. Story 5. Music teacher here. I had a heli mom of one of my guitar students sit in on him during his first lesson. She was sitting right by him, shoulder to shoulder. As I was talking about various things like how to hold the guitar and how to shape your hands and fingers around the neck, she would grab his hand and do it for him. Every single time for everything. Time to strum some chords, mom did that for him too. Can't get the fret hand to squeeze hard enough to make the strings ring? She pressed his fingers for him. He cried out at that, and that's when I stopped and told her she had to let him do it on his own. All I got for that was a sharp look and a "fine then." He tried on his own and the string just kind of made a thud noise and she said, "See, he needs me to help him." I told her that the only way he was going to be able to do it was to try and do it on his own. He was the one who had to build up the strength. Things didn't really progress much after that, and I ended the lesson. With all of that, I wasn't thinking they'd be sticking around for a second week, but back they came. The second lesson started off the same, and I politely told her she'd have to give him space in order to try. Still, she wasn't thrilled but relented and got up in a huff and went out into the hall to watch from there. After she left, this kid took a deep breath and was visibly more relaxed. After she stepped out, he was able to have his own space, and he actually tried on his own. He started to do better. It was awesome. At the end of the lesson, he said he couldn't wait to come back, and his mom came in and grilled him with something like, "Why can't you do that when I'm helping you? You don't want my help? You don't need my help?" I could understand stuff like this if he was a young kid, maybe 7 or younger, but dude's like 14 years old. He's going to be a freshman in the fall. This poor kid has ended up being one of my best students. His mom still hovers, and he's still a super weird and socially awkward dude from living in a bubble, but he's finally found something he can be good at independently from his mom. It's really rewarding to see him gaining more and more confidence, even if it is slowly. He'll get there someday. Story 6. I taught middle school for 1 year. We had a student who was being disruptive in all the classes. He was refusing to turn in work or even do it. He was constantly causing trouble. We had each tried several strategies to deal with the behavior in our own time. We had each talked to the parents numerous times, but they never did anything or believed that the student was doing anything inappropriate. No one was having any success. Eventually, one of the teachers had enough, so he suggested we do a meeting between all of the students as teachers, the guidance counselor, a vice principal, the student, and his parents. There are 6 teachers plus a vice principal and the guidance counselor all saying the same basic version of student needs to pay attention, needs to do the work, needs to stop distracting other students, needs to be respectful, etc., etc. The mother disbelieves us. It's not the student's fault. We all have it in for the student. Nothing changed. Teaching sucks. Story 7. An incredibly quiet student just flat out refused to engage in any discussion in class. She was an extremely pleasant girl. She just wouldn't speak. I brought it up with her mother during an interview, and she told me she'd forbidden her daughter to express her opinion and to just listen to the teacher out of fear they wouldn't agree with her opinion and mark her down out of bias. I assured her that expressing an opinion wouldn't get a student marked down in my class, and that developing one is important to her learning, but she just said, "I'd rather she didn't." Story 8. Less helicopter parent, more "my child is innocent" and a scam. My mom was kicked out of work temporarily from her underprivileged school until this case was settled. A kindergartner had just gotten her ears pierced, and she took the earrings out in class because they hurt. The teacher sent her to the health secretary. My mom and the little girl lost an earring somewhere along the way, cleaned the ears, and sent her back to class. The mother of the child sued my mom and filed the case with the school because I guess the earrings were solid gold and diamond. I guess that's what Claire's pierced with. Seems legit. Try to accuse my mom of stealing the earring. No chance that a 6-year-old lost a tiny object, right? Of course, the woman did not win in this situation, and my mom got back to work, but it was a whole bunch of baloney accusing the teachers and office employees at the school for a lost earring and injured earlobe. Story 9. I wasn't a teacher, but I did have a brief stint as a cheerleading coach. Kid gives an attitude about doing literally anything, won't follow any instruction, and usually either sasses me or sits on her phone. Additionally, kid skips practice to consume Xanax and put it on her Snapchat. Okay, I told her that if she wasn't interested in participating, she can sit in the stands Friday night instead. Kid proceeds to go to the bathroom and calls mother. It's not like I can actually take away their phones. Try dealing with parents on that. Mother drives from work 30 minutes to scream at me for almost an hour. Apparently, it's my fault. Her child is the best on the team, and I am clearly targeting her. She says I have destroyed her confidence and am jealous of her talent. She can do whatever she wants if she's the best on the squad. Okay, lady. I stopped coaching after that year. Story 10. While I was student teaching, I had a student and his mom was the art teacher. The student was a straight-up schmuck, would cheat on any assignment, belittle classmates, etc. Anytime the student got in trouble or called out, he would run to his mom, the art teacher, and she would fight for him. All the teachers in the schools were afraid of her since she has been in the district for a long time and was thought to do no wrong by the administration. The student ended up plagiarizing an essay in class. I gave the student a 0, as it was stated in the assignment sheet that all plagiarism would be an automatic 0. And all hell broke loose. Meetings with the principal were set up. Mom would come in during my plan period and yell at my rear for failing her kid. And the student would come fake crying to class to discuss the work. The essay was a large portion of the grade and would mean he would fail the class. After about 2 weeks of the mom coming in, I finally told her if he turned a new essay into me by the end of the week, he could get 50% credit on it, would move his grade to a D if he got 100%. The student comes waltzing into class on Friday and hands me his essay. After quickly scanning the essay, it just seemed off. After a quick Google search, the student took the entire Wikipedia page and copied it for his essay. After school, I went down to the art room to talk to the mom. I still remember the conversation like it was yesterday. Me, M did a great job on his essay. Mom, great, he was locked up in his room all week working on it. Me, when I looked at his paper, I did notice there was an odd section though. Mom, what do you mean? Me, this section has a superscript number on it and I don't see where he cited it. Mom, that is odd, I'll ask him about it. Me, pulls out the printed Wikipedia page over his topic that is word for word. Here is the Wikipedia page over his topic if you want to look at it. Mom, scanning over both, and her face turns ghost white. Will he be able to make this up? Me, with a look of disbelief on my face. Hell no. The student ended up getting suspended and mom tried to fight the suspension. She even went as far as to look into the legitimacy of the grade since the student teacher taught the course. All in all, the mom is no longer a teacher in the district and the kid is in jail for selling substances. The rest of the staff love me for standing up to her and her son. Story 11. Okay, 2 great stories. Happened in 2006. A parent who volunteered in her child's classroom just to videotape her child all day, every day. She threatened to sue if we did not allow her to. She did this all through elementary. It ended in middle school when they told her no. She stood outside the fence and videotaped him at PE. Someone saw this and called the police. She pulled her kid and homeschooled him. Happened to a brother and sister I went to high school with. The son was socially awkward, tall, and a little round. He was in high school for only a year by himself, but his mom was present at every band function we had. She even tried to come to every practice, even the ones from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., but then she decided that her 7th grade daughter was going to skip the 8th grade so she could enter high school early. Now she had 2 kids. She was always at school, even stopping by to lunch with them. It was so sad, the kids were miserable. Then she had her daughter skip the 11th grade, literally appealing to the school board, threatening legal action if they held back her child from her quote-unquote destiny. So now she has both kids in the same grade, they graduate together, mom enrolls them in community college together in the same classes with her. So she is now going to classes with them. She never actually passes the classes, but she wants to be with them so that the professors know that she is watching. Since she is a student, there are no grounds for having her removed. The kids get ready to transfer to the local university. They are done with mom. She tries to sit in on classes, but that is a big no from day one. They diverge in interests so they get their own majors. Then they go nuts with classes, appealing to admin to take a huge load of credits. They're in school all day, every day they can. How I met up with them again was weird. I was working on campus and closed the library one night. I found them bedding down for the night in their old station wagon in the parking lot. I offered to let them stay overnight with me. They came to my house and told the tale. Last I heard, the daughter dropped out and went into the medical field. Story 12. I'm a nanny on the Upper East Side of New York, and while my boss is a good non-helicopter father, I routinely have playdates with other kids. I have a 4, 8, and 13-year-old, so I've seen it all pretty much. My 2 favorites, though. A mother of one of my girls' little friends called my boss up all furious and insisting he fire me because I let her child play with sidewalk paint. She was mad I made her 7-year-old use a paintbrush instead of doing the drawing for him after he told me what he wanted. He could have poked his eye out with a brush, according to her, and it was irresponsible. The saddest part was that little boy told me before he left how fun it was when we made the paints ourselves and then got to use them. My 13-year-old had a sleepover and I got a 4-page list of things one girl wasn't allowed to do or eat. When I asked her about it, she told me she was only allergic to hazelnuts and everything on the list was there because her mom didn't want her getting fat. I let her eat with the girls. We had build-your-own nacho and quesadilla thing. And I took them to our bodega that is legitimately less than 250 feet away. It's the bottom level of an apartment building on our corner, and we're not even in the middle of the block, and got candy and soda to watch movies around 10 after they begged me to do so. And her mother informed my boss 2 days later her kid was no longer allowed to be friends with his daughter, and it was my fault, as it was irresponsible for me to let 4 girls leave the house after dark with a chaperone or not. I also have a great one about my 4-year-old's team hockey mom threatening to call CPS on me so she could get my boss's attention, but that's less helicopter parenting and more pathetic. Story 13. I'll give 2 examples, one suburban, one inner city. Suburban, kid asked where dogs come from. Not sure why, I was an English teacher. I said they were bred from wolves and gave 2 common explanations for how a human interaction may have started. Mom called the school, then called me, angry that I mentioned evolution, turned into a whole thing. Inner city, teen sucker punched some poor girl, then teen punched me in the face when I broke them up. Ended up getting escorted off by a campus cop. Dad, who was obviously a substance user, showed up to the school and started threatening to kick everyone's rear. Story 14. Had a pretty typical red, yellow, green behavior chart. One child was just transferred to me, not a completely terrible kid, but he had a habit of not knowing where the line was, so it got him in trouble from time to time. Every time I flipped his card to a yellow or red, I would always let the parent know what happened and what we're going to do to stop the behavior in the future. She then goes off on how it's the other little kid causing the problems and her child is perfect. I let her know that while there isn't a perfect person in the scenario, both kids could have acted in a different way. She then stated, and I'm not kidding, I know that the other kid is a dirty foster child. Still to this day I don't know how she learned this. And he assaulted my child. Foster child pushed back after he was hit by her child. She did this in front of the other child. I told her to meet me in the office, had a meeting with the director, and she was no longer allowed in my classroom. However, I had to take down my behavior chart, which kind of stunk because of how well it was working. Story 15. Not a teacher or child caretaker, but I remember when I was in 8th grade, this little kid, about 3rd or 4th grade, was really weird and hung around us while we skateboarded. One day, he decided to come up after I fell and just grind against me. I was obviously mad and told him to go away, and he didn't. Well, I fell another time, and he ground against me again. I was livid. I told him if he doesn't go away, I'll tell his parents. Then he just walked up to me while I was sitting on the bench and ground against me again. I told him I'm going to tell your parents, and he bolts inside his house, closing everything. All the guys I was with were fed up too, so I decided to walk to his house and knock on his door. No one answered for about a minute, then both his mom and dad was a cop, come out. I told them what he did. Well, his mom completely ignores what I say and then explains, well, he said you punched him multiple times. Mind you, I did not punch this kid, but I did push him off twice when I fell and pushed him away from me when I was on the bench. Not one of the times did he fall or stumble. I just gave a simple push. She continues to pester me, saying I'm a child beater, and then the dad chimes in and says he should arrest me. Well, of course, I start crying because I'm scared. Again, reiterated that I never hit him. I simply pushed him because of his unacceptable behavior. Then they tell me how he has ADHD and was just acting out. I say, well, I was diagnosed with ADD a couple of years ago and it's never made me do anything like what he did. Then the dad screams, if you don't get off my lawn, I'm going to arrest you, and starts walking towards his cop car. All of us run his way as fast as we can and I run home. Well, after a while, my dad gets home and I tell him all of this. So he calls his buddy, who was the guy's superior, and tells him what happened. Apparently, the dad was going to get a promotion, but they just kept him as is. He got suspended from the police force for a couple of weeks and got kicked off the neighborhood board members committee. They suspended him on unlawful use of power or something like that. He came up to my house and personally apologized, put his house up for sale, but took it off because it never sold. They're still there, and the kid is still as messed up today. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 16. Late to the post, but I'm a high school counselor. Last year I had a student who was a total sweetheart, but really needed intervention. This girl was a sophomore and had a grand total of 20 credits towards graduation under her belt. She should have had 90 by that point and was on track to fail 25 more that spring. She was failing miserably. Not only that, but she would be constantly ditching class and often end up in my office because there was nowhere else to go. The school has only one way, in or out. I did everything in my power to help this girl and eventually was able to get a parent meeting with myself, teachers, and the school psychologist, along with school administrators involved. I explained to her parents in great detail how at this point it was mathematically impossible for her to graduate from high school at that school at the rate she was failing classes. I offered continuation school that has a much higher rate of graduation for students in her situation. I desperately wanted her to get tested for special education because it was obvious she had deficiencies and could have at least gotten some legal accommodations put in place for her in order to help her. Parents just said no to everything. No to continuation school because that's where the bad kids went. No to testing because special ed had a bad stigma. No to after-school tutoring because she's capable of doing all of this work. No to working one-on-one with the school psychologist to sort out her emotional issues. No to everything. I've never felt so defeated and knew then that I couldn't save every kid no matter how much I wanted to. Story 17. A parent at my school worked for the district but in a different department. Her daughter was really average, not an A student but not failing. There was no way this kid was a top performer in any way, but probably had a solid college career ahead of her. Well, that wasn't good enough for mom and she wanted the kid to be valedictorian or nothing else. So she read the entire handbook on school accommodations and learning disabilities and began petitioning. She managed to get her kid labeled as needing accommodations and then helicoptered the teacher to make sure they were being met. If the kid got lower than an A, she would find something that the teacher didn't do and bring it up with admin. It became such a problem that the teacher was receiving emails almost twice per day, and the admin was getting multiple calls per day. The teacher had to hire a lawyer and file a lawsuit for pestering with the union. The mom countersued, of course, and things got heated for a while. I remember the superintendent even getting involved. Every heckin' person in admin knew she was full of stuff and making it up. No one could call her out because she was crazy, had money, and was ready to sue. They managed to somehow settle with her, basically waited out until summer. The only consequence she faced was related to emails. Apparently, she was using her work email to pester the teacher. They started monitoring her computer use and she was no longer allowed to communicate with the teacher in question. Story 18. Teacher here, we had a student, 5th grade, who was pretty sneaky at first. He acted innocent, but he was far from it. I'll jump to the end. He stepped on someone when they were lying down during free reading time. He would constantly talk and prevent the class from getting to lunch and specials on time and did this just to cause trouble. He hit someone with a meter stick. He would accidentally kick people. He stole stuff. He said bad words. Mom came out and said we were singling him out and he would never do those things and told us to stop contacting her. Later, he did something else, something like ripping up classroom decorations or something like that, and the principal saw it. Principal called mom. Instead of accepting her child does wrong, she pulled him out of school. Since he hadn't been doing his work, this kid that was actually quite smart had all F's as transfer grades. Story 19. Not a child care worker, but one of my oldest friends suffered from this. It's been passed so many times around my parents' friend group it isn't even funny. His mom basically did all of his homework through high school. He was a very bright kid but had no motivation as his mom did everything for him. Once he went to college and moved out, it was apparent that he didn't have the life skills to succeed on his own. His parents desperately wanted him to pass in college and tried so hard, but he eventually failed and dropped out. From what I gather now, he still lives at his parents' house and tries to hold jobs his mother gets for him, but can never get into work on time and always gets fired. I feel super sorry for the guy because he would have been a good dude in society if his parents didn't mess it all up. I think he might have some underlying signs of ADHD, but he was never tested. Story 20. I'd posted this some time ago on r/childfree. When I was 21, I was still living with my parents. Our neighbors were just the worst kind of parents. They let their kids bully other children and pester people as pets. One time, the kids were pestering the puppies of a stray dog that lived in our neighborhood, pulling their tails, twisting their ears, etc. Predictably and understandably, the mama dog growled and snapped at them. Some of the other neighbors tried to tell them that they shouldn't commit acts of cruelty against animals. The kids' mom began yelling that a dangerous animal almost terminated her babies. One day, they came to our place for dinner. I couldn't stand this family, so I decided to eat in my room. Then suddenly, I heard our puppy let out a painful yelp. Turns out the girl had kicked him. I ran downstairs immediately and picked him up while staring daggers at the kids. Their parents just smiled and said, "Oh, the kids were just playing with your pup." I lost my temper and yelled at them to get the heck out. They left, grumbling about how rude I was being. However, in just a few days, the mom asked my stepmom, who was a teacher, to tutor her kids, free of cost, of course. Story 21. I work in a kindy in China. We have about 35 kids in each class seated in 4 rows of 8 with a split down the middle facing the teacher. We move the children about once a month. Each child moves back 1 row and the back row gets to sit in the front row. One parent came in and told us that her child must always be seated in the front row. There's nothing wrong with the child's eyesight. She's just too special to be seated anywhere but the front row, I guess. The parent did not request this. She ordered us. Another time in primary, the headmaster came to talk to me, aghast. We had one special group of children that was taught all in English for every subject. This is very expensive, and all the parents are pretty rich. One guy has 3 Porsches, a red, yellow, and blue one, and drives whatever color he feels like to school. He also has several Harley Davidsons. Anyway, this very rich mother was upset because the other rich kids didn't want to play with her daughter. Her daughter, having servants at home, tried to order the other kids around, and you can imagine how popular that made her. This mother threatened to have the other children terminated unless they started playing with her daughter. Story 22. I had a parent swear I was targeting her son and that he was failing my class because I was refusing to allow him his modifications. He was severely dysgraphic. That's a very serious accusation and can result in sanctions against your teaching license and federal lawsuits. To prove that I was following his plan and that he simply wasn't doing his work, I started sending him to the special education lab, which allows kids with modifications and accommodations to have a quiet place to work and a smaller teacher-to-student ratio. He immediately decides to cheat on his work so his grades will go up and it will look like I was a problem, but the teachers in the lab caught it and documented it for me. The mom insisted that he just felt pressured to perform, which he may have, but it wasn't coming from me. The mom and I clashed the rest of the year. The next year, one of my students who had been in the class brought me a newspaper article where the kid had been arrested for substance possession and told me he was in rehab. Overall, the kid was a terribly behaved kid, but I still felt bad for him because he had to go home to his mom. Story 23. I work as a camp counselor for church camps. One girl I had in my cabin was an absolute spoiled kid. She would sass me, call girls in the cabins idiots, and tell them she was better than them because she was in gifted classes, and she would punch some of the boy campers. She hugged my friend, who was a boys counselor, and ended up causing him to fall and bust his lip. When she was confronted about it, she just shrugged and said, "He's the one who fell, it's his fault." The final straw was when she got mad because I told her she couldn't go to the playground. We were literally eating lunch, like sit down and eat, so she huffed and shoved my little sister into a chair screaming, "Get out of my way, kid." My sister only cries when she's mad. I looked over to her completely shocked, and as soon as I saw tears welling up in her eyes, I knew it was time. I grabbed her, took her to my friend, and as he tried to calm her down, I ran after this kid. I told her she had to apologize, and she straight up went, "My mom says I never have to apologize because people should be paying attention to me. When I get angry, I blow up, etc." Honestly, I didn't hear her. I was seeing red because who the heck did this 10-year-old think she was, hurting my sister? I ended up letting her get back to the cabin. She's crying and screaming at my older girls in the cabin now. And I got the camp director. He yelled at her, made her apologize, and told me to call her mom. Called the mom, and this lady seriously went, "She didn't seem to do anything wrong. Maybe that little girl should grow some thicker skin." Excuse me, my sister is super thick skinned. Your kid just angered her because who wants to be pushed into a metal chair like that? Wow, sorry that's so long. I've never been so angry at a kid before in my life. I hope this kid doesn't end up in my cabin again. Story 24. Not a teacher, but I used to nanny for a pretty affluent lady down the street during the summer holidays in high school. Took legitimate childcare classes before starting, multiple younger siblings of my own, leader of a local youth group, etc. I felt prepared. I was getting the kid up and running in the morning, pick up after preschool, preparing lunch, dinner, crafts, planning activities up until bedtime, and putting the kid to sleep. The little girl was about 3. I had my own key to the house, and on most days, I didn't see the mom until about 20 minutes after her child went to sleep. Kid was a spoiled one, temper tantrums over every single instance that didn't go exactly her way. Screeching hissy fits and tears all day long. Kid would purposely drop cereal on the ground and refuse to pick it up because that is what the housekeeper is for. She had a personal cell phone at 3 as a direct line so her dad could call her whenever he felt like it. She was randomly telling cashiers at the store that they were poor, making endless demands for gifts and candy. Never really had food that wasn't takeout before we started cooking together. No discipline whatsoever. Now the kicker here, whenever the tears didn't immediately work, the little girl would snottily announce, "If you don't do what I say, then I will feel ill," and then demand that you caught the wretch with your hands. Her mom did exactly that. I didn't. Made it through 3 years of that before I went off to university simply because the mom paid so incredibly well and because no one else was willing to go babysit there. In the end, the kid liked me a lot, mostly because I didn't put up with her stuff and because I took her out for activities outdoors and walked with my dog, but she actually behaved. Last I heard, the kid's grandma moved in with them so she could accompany their little Veruca Salt to school every day. Her mom still thinks that her kid is special and smart for being demanding. Story 25. Kid never did any work in class, was caught trying to cheat numerous times, and overall was a disruption. I never liked to just give a kid a 0, so I'd given him numerous opportunities to make up work and redo the stuff he cheated on. Rarely took advantage of it and was missing a lot of work. One day I got an email from his mother asking why his grade was so low and as to why I was slacking off on putting his work into my gradebook. Overall, the email was probably 5 to 6 paragraphs long, pestering me. I was a student teacher at the time, so I knew nothing. The work she was referring to was stuff he had turned in about 2 hours before this email came to me. Everything got turned into our school website in this class, so it was all digital. Needless to say, I quickly figured out the kid fabricated his work, told his mom it was all my fault that his grade was so low because I wasn't doing my job, and overall I should feel ashamed for putting him in that position. I sent her a nice reply, pointing out the timestamps on the assignment showing he'd only recently sent the stuff in, and that I normally try to get everything in about 24 hours after it gets submitted, but that it may be a little longer when assignments are turned in late. Mother never replied back after realizing her son had lied to her about basically everything. Story 26. Sometime in 2012, I distinctly remember it happening not long after Sandy Hook. A 4th grader I worked with was taking apart a highlighter at the sink and overflowing a cup. I asked him what his intention was, and he said, "I'm going to poison a girl I don't like with highlighter juice." I asked why he would do that, and he said, "I really hate her." I told my incompetent superior about this, and she said, "Oh, he's just being dramatic," and blew me off. I told her if she did not escalate this, I'm going over her head, and she said fine. When his mom came to pick him up, we explained what happened, and she looked at him like, "Oh my, did you really do this?" In a way like she's never heard him do anything close to this. This was not the first time we've had issues with this kid that involved telling his parents, but she just sounded so surprised this time. The next afternoon, I could hear the kid from across the room telling his friends under his breath how he hated me for reporting this. The kid openly admitted he wanted to poison someone, and the cup in the sink was full of yellow water. For the rest of the week, when he got picked up by mom, she asked him how his day went, and he gave her the puppy dog eye treatment, as if plotting to injure someone didn't happen a few days earlier. She was so whipped. Parenting is awful these days. I swear, I'm no longer in the field. Story 27. When I was a student teacher, I had a student when he was in 7th grade, and he was an absolute horror. Far more than the regular obnoxiousness common with that age. I mean, this kid didn't even give a darn and acted like he was invincible. He was mean, he was rude, and he didn't listen to anything anyone had to say. From what the other teachers told me, he lived with his grandmother who was Native American, and anytime anyone at the school tried to talk to her about the issues they were having with him, she pulled out the race card and said they were targeting her grandson because he was Native American, and not because her grandson was, in fact, a little schmuck. She threatened to sue, and the school stopped bothering to call her. He knew he could get away with anything, and there was nothing they could do. I'm curious whatever happened to him. I wouldn't be surprised if he was in jail. Story 28. I taught middle school social studies, and we would watch Channel 1 News daily and write in our writing journals about what we saw. and heard that stood out or what was interesting, then we would have brief 5 to 10 minute discussions after and allow kids to read or respond. This was in 2013-15 when there were a lot of stories about gay marriage at the Supreme Court, transgender bathroom laws, Syria, protests, etc. Well, that was mentioned several times on the school's unofficial Facebook page that I had a gay agenda and that I was trying to teach students about the gay lifestyle. Two parents banded together and got other parents whose kids were not even in my class to confront the school board. They did an official investigation and I was told to stay home for a few days. It all amounted to nothing after they interviewed the kids and clarified the situation and even read some of the journals. I basically got 2 days off with pay, but I did not like the scrutiny in a social studies class where teaching current events is important. Story 29. I didn't answer a phone call from my parents in college and they called security at 7 a.m. on a Saturday to knock on my dorm room to wake me up and call them. They talked to all my high school teachers prior to the first day of school to get extra books so I didn't have to carry anything home. They wrote a handwritten letter to me asking me not to go to my boyfriend's house during the week because the road was too dangerous. I was 23. They wrote my high school papers for me. Story 30. I work daily with kids in outdoor programs. I screamed at a kid who was about to run into the road while a car was coming. The only time I ever scream like that is when a child's life is in danger. The child proceeded to have a meltdown because, as I later found out, he never gets disciplined and his parents never hold boundaries with him. His mother was there and comforted him. She wasn't mad at me, but she was saying, "Forest Ninja is sorry she yelled at you." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I stopped him from getting terminated by a car." I've gotten to know this child over 2 years and he is so disruptive and is never held accountable. It's pretty scary because I work in nature education. I meet a lot of parents experimenting with alternative parenting, and most methods do more harm than good. Be in charge. You're the adult. Story 31. I guess this is more helicopter aunting, but I still think it applies. I'm a college professor, so 99.9% of the time I never hear from my students as parents, and legally, thanks to FERPA laws, couldn't talk to them about their students even if I wanted to. Last year, during the final week of one of these summer bridge programs for incoming freshmen I teach in, I got an email from one of my students' aunts. She wrote me a 5-page long email. I copied it into Word because I was curious, detailing, line by line and comment by comment, why she disagreed with what I'd written on her niece's essay and the rationale I'd used to give it an F. Every single one of my comments on a 5-page essay had a short paragraph devoted to picking apart the comment and rebutting it. At the end, she pestered my teaching and suggested I'd failed the student out of spite. Totally untrue. The girl could barely string together a coherent sentence, let alone a grammatically correct one. When I told her I wasn't allowed to talk to her about her students' grades due to the federal law, she called the program director and demanded I be fired. The fun twist at the end of the story, though, is that we ultimately figured out why she was so angry with my comments. Turns out she'd been writing her niece's essays all summer and had taken my comments personally. Needless to say, the niece was removed from the program. Story 32. I once worked as an au pair for a family and a few days in, the mom had to go to work early, and so I was fixing the kids' breakfast. I asked the daughter what they normally had and she said cereal, so I fixed it. The younger boy then comes down and throws the bowl on the ground and starts demanding ice cream. Now, I assumed this was just a tantrum and didn't give him any, and instead managed to convince him into toast covered in Nutella, which seemed a bit better. When his mom got home, I told her what had happened and she was shocked that I hadn't immediately caved and said in the future I should give him whatever he asked for. The rest of the time I stayed with his family, I never once saw this kid eat any fruits or vegetables, had ice cream for breakfast and sometimes dinner if he was really playing up. The fact his parents never considered this maybe should change still shocks me. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. I'll catch you in that video.